Welcome to the first episode ever, episode 1 of the 6 Scale Scavengers, a Hot Toys podcast as part of the Brick City Blockade podcast network. This is Bryan Fontaine, aka the Jedi Scavenger, and every show I'm going to be joined with my good friend Christopher James Leddy, aka Vintage Viewport, and we're going to talk some Hot Toys, Star Wars, Marvel. I don't know what else really to say, Chris, other than we're both really excited to get this kicked off.
Yeah, we are very excited. It's been a long time coming. We've been teasing it for a while, and we're just excited to share our passion, our newfound passion for Hot Toys, specifically, as you said, Marvel and Star Wars.
So hopefully you had a chance already on the Brick City Blockade podcast network podcast feed to check out our episode 0 that we just recorded this week. And we went to a little bit of a preview of what to expect. And it was really just kind of, Chris, just to whet the appetite a little bit. It doesn't mean we may not repeat ourselves from something that we said there. But as you mentioned, this is a passion for both you and I. I've not quite been collecting Hot Toys for a year now. I hooked you hook, line, and sinker a couple months after that. And it's something that a lot of our daily conversations, either texting back and forth, are usually centered around Hot Toys and what's the news and whatnot. So just like I said in the preview episode, we don't pretend to be experts. And, I would say we're probably considered fanatics, and we're eager to learn and learn more and join other Facebook groups and just learn as much as we can about these figures, because this line has been out there. The Marvel line has been out there since 2008 when they first did one of the first Iron Man figures, and Star Wars kicked off. There was a Luke Skywalker figure released in 2012, I believe, DX07. And as I mentioned, we'll get into what those little acronyms mean at some point. But then it was really 2014 when the license really started to take off, for Star Wars. So, some good stuff there. As I mentioned, we want to, learn with you as our audience, learn from you as the audience, and just and see where this crazy little venture goes. Because, Chris, the internet needs one more collecting podcast.
Yes, it really does. There's not enough. We need as many as we can get. No, I think, us focusing in on the Hot Toys line and providing this content for collectors out there. There's not too many other podcasts. There's a lot of YouTubers doing stuff with Hot Toys, but not too many podcasts, talking about Hot Toys and specifically Marvel and Star Wars. So yeah, we need another one.
Yeah, we're sorry, DC and all the other licenses, but we gotta cut the line somewhere, and whatnot better to talk about both of these. So Chris, I guess any podcast adventure kind of starts with an origin story. We were talking before we hit record on this first inaugural episode, and I was telling you how I got involved. And anybody that has known me for any length of time on the Brick City Blockade podcast network knows that I have a big affinity for the Shore Trooper design that was created for Rogue One on Scarif, and that was my gateway drug into Hot Toys. Looking over here in my dork lair here, and I have a whole shelf dedicated to anything I've found about Shore Troopers, and I finally said, hey, that Hot Toys one looks pretty cool. It looks awesome. It also looks expensive. So I took the plunge. I went on eBay. I found a reasonably priced one, which now that figure right now is actually pretty hard to come by. And we'll talk about that as these episodes kind of go by. And Chris, I got the figure and I opened it up, and the box, even from the box, I was just like, this is going to be an experience. And I opened it, and the artwork underneath, and I just I could not, it just blew my mind on how much detail was there. And
Yeah.
I didn't even know what to do. I felt like it was like this religious experience. I'm like, oh my God, this is like, there's no turning back now. Like, this is what collecting is. I literally, over the course of the next couple of months, I was a big collector with SH Figure Arts. I was complete on the line. I think I have 2 figures now. I had at one point all of them. And our good friend Bill Janowski over at the Door Player, good shout out to him. I know he gave us a shout out on Instagram today. Yeah, it's how it happened. And then, and Chris, as I was mentioning, like within a week on Sideshow, I pre-ordered the figure that we're going to talk about today. So what a better way to kick off episode 1.
Oh, it's a great story. These figures are next level figures. They're pieces of art. Honestly, there's so many people involved with creating these figures, and it really shows the amount of time and effort, the detail that the artists put into these figures. It's just amazing. And I can see where you got hooked, because not that long after, I got hooked. And I blame you. I also blame our friend Scott Inch over in Scotland. He kind of introduced us to Hot Toys and that sort of thing. And one of my favorite characters in the Marvel series is Black Widow. You had gotten the Winter Soldier version of Black Widow. And that's my favorite. The aesthetic of Black Widow in that movie, that's my ideal look for the character. So you pointed me in the direction of, eBay, and I checked out the auction, and I ended up getting the figure at a really good price. And thankfully you handled the situation for me, and we sneakily did a deal, in a hospital parking lot. And people are probably wondering what was going on. No, that from that point on, I was just hooked.
Yep, I still remember that day where we happened to be working in the same town, and you were like, "Hey, you got the stuff?" I was like, "Yeah, I got the stuff," and we the transaction occurred, and that was the end of it, because then I think you went hook, line, and sinker too.
Oh man,
it's like I had just said, it's like there's something. You can look at a lot of the great Instagrammers out there, Chris. You mentioned the YouTubers out there. You can see videos and pictures of them, but I don't think until you can see them in hand and see them in person and see, I'm looking at our feature figure we'll be talking about here soon, and it literally looks lifelike. It still blows my mind, even after all these months of how they possibly can do the paint that they do, to have the eyes look glossy and lifelike. It literally looks like you've got a miniaturized version of the actor or actress or trooper or whatever it is, like right in front of you in a 1/6 scale.
The likenesses over the years, Hot Toys has really worked hard on perfecting the actors and actresses' likenesses. And you can see that progression. You look back at the archives of all the figures that have been released, you can see that natural progression of the quality of the sculpting and the paint apps and the hair, whether it's sculpted, whether it's rooted. I mean, it's just amazing. And yeah, when I opened up that figure, that Black Widow, and granted that figure came out a number of years ago, and I couldn't believe it. I jumped right on Sideshow, saw what they had, started plotting out my devious plan of who was next, and from what you had gone through with your research and that sort of thing, and I started digging in, seeing where the Facebook groups that were really involved with this scale, and checking out all the websites. I just went crazy on it. So we'll get into all that stuff in further episodes, but it's just been, a fun ride so far, and I look forward to what's coming down the pipeline.
Yeah, I think it's only just going to get better. And one thing you had mentioned there too, I'm even looking at some of the figures that I've collected on the Marvel side from even when the first Avengers film came out. And you mentioned some of those figures, and to even see where it's progressed in the last, say, 6 years, it's made this significant jump. And in the first, like I said, I believe it was 2008 when they got the license to do the first Iron Man figures. And one of the jokes about Hot Toys is they just keep making Iron Man figures, but people keep buying Iron Man figures because they're awesome. And they keep getting better now that they've done die cast ones, and they're able to redo some of the original ones they did under a hard plastic and now in die cast. And we're excited to talk about some of those coming up. But Chris, I think it's also fitting that we are now coming off of San Diego Comic-Con, and Hot Toys and Sideshow had a presence at San Diego Comic-Con 2018 and teased the heck out of a lot of figures. And one thing that we'll talk about here too is that just because they've got a prototype of a figure out there, there's a strong likelihood that they could make it, but they've shown figures over the last couple of years that have really never materialized. And Chris, you talked about something on our preview episode 0, about the CEO of Hot Toys is so involved with the process that, maybe they do some market research, maybe they test it out and said, okay, now that we have this prototype and we're going to mass produce it, what does that look like? So it can be disappointing for fans sometimes to really count on some of those figures to show up, and they may not be. So that's one thing that I know you're likely the same. One of the first things I do up in the morning, and because Hot Toys is based in Hong Kong and they're 12 to 14 hours ahead of where we are on the East Coast in the United States, there's usually already news out for the day of what it's going to look like. And then later that afternoon, and we know it very well now, Chris, it's usually around 3 to 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Yep. Is once they've announced it early in the morning, Sideshow's got it up on their website. And then we're looking then to find out additional images from the Hot Toys main site. You can see that. We're going to see what the price that Sideshow is going to charge for the pre-order, when it's going to come out. It's like, I feel like a kid in a candy store every time there's a new figure released.
It's kind of funny. Like, I get super excited. We're texting each other back and forth saying, is it released yet? Is it released yet? It really depends on the character too. If it's someone that we're passionate about, or one of our characters that fits into our focus or something like that. But it's also neat to see all the different figures that are coming out. There's just as many passionate fans for those characters, as there are for the ones that we collect.
And we've talked about in our preview episode is that because these are, you really have to really want the figure because of the cost associated with them. And, on our website, brickcityblockade.com, we have our checklist that we've referenced, and we've listed out the original retail prices. But then, after something's been released and it's been out there for a couple of years, the secondary market really kind of dictates that price. It's almost really neat to kind of live vicariously through seeing what's out there, to see what other people are passionate about as collectors, and knowing that you can't possibly own it all. I mean, there's financial constraints, there's space constraints, there's displaying, and then the pre-orders, as we'll eventually talk about for these, sometimes can be almost a year in advance. So it's that payoff of knowing that basically this figure that I ordered last October finally showed up on my doorstep from Sideshow in June. I was like a kid in a candy store on that day. I think it's important to really know what your focus is, and it's okay to change it up. I've even recently kind of decided that I'm going to change up a little bit of my collection, not necessarily churning the bottom end of it, but just finding opportunities to make sure that my collection is the best representation of where I am as a fan, what my interests are, and making sure that I think you and I get even more excited when we know that there's a figure that we've wanted to come out. It gets announced, and then some of them we both happen to be going for, and we'll talk about what our pre-orders are and stuff in future episodes. But If I know that it's a figure that you want, that it's not one that I'm particularly not necessarily interested in, but just know that it's not one that I'm going to get, I'm usually right there. I'm like, hey, buddy, it's live. I'm not like I'm enticing you or whatnot, or
No, not at all.
But I think we enjoy helping each other too. And it's not just exclusive to us as our friendship. There are a lot of collectors out there that are very passionate as well, and are looking to help each other out and let everybody know when news drops, or when something's available, or when there's a good deal, or a lot of different things.
That's the thing that is, not to go too deep, but that's the fulfilling part of it, is we can share in this collecting experience together. It just makes things, more enjoyable, that we can these chats and discussions about these figures. And it's fun that there is this, I had never, honestly, before this whole experience, I had never even really considered the idea of pre-ordering toys and figures or anything like that. It's never really something that I was into. I'm always hunting, looking for the stuff in store. And my other collecting focuses are with vintage Star Wars. And for that, I'm always hunting antique malls, yard sales, deals on eBay. So this is a totally different experience for me with the Hot Toys, and getting into these pre-orders and mapping everything out and projecting which figures, how many figures can I fit into the budget? Where do I want to focus in on? And for me, I'm a huge Star Wars fan. I'm equally as big Marvel fan, but I've got a huge Star Wars collection. So I decided that I'm going to go for just the Marvel characters that I really like. Not necessarily just Avengers, but whatever ones that come out or that had been released previously that I really wanted. Those were the ones I was going to go for. And that's kind of my direction. As much as I love the Star Wars Hot Toy figures, I'm just trying to keep things real, and I'm not going down that path, but I can go over your place and check yours out.
Those are the best kind of collecting buddies to have, live vicariously through their collections. So
yeah, for sure. So we'll just touch upon what direction are you going in? You said you made a change, tighten things up or whatever. What direction are you going in with your collecting?
So I do have a focus I shouldn't even say a focus with Star Wars, because we all have different things that we love to collect. I think some of my anchors of my Star Wars collection for Hot Toys is two of my favorite characters, Luke Skywalker and Rey. I've chased down some of the older ones for all of those. I'm still my white whale right now, and it's just, I don't know if I'll ever get it, and I'm okay with it, is the first Luke Skywalker that I'd mentioned, deluxe version DX07 that came out in 2012, which was a dual version of Luke in his Bespin outfit. I keep hoping, Hot Toys, if you're listening, please reissue that figure. And but other than that, I have some of the Avengers figures, but right now my main kind of focus for the Marvel side is I'm a huge Captain America fan. Again, I've got all but one figure there, and it's kind of more of a technicality, Chris, that I don't have the other one. Black Widow, as you mentioned, I've got all of the Black Widow figures. And then from there, it's, what I'll probably do is some of my more favorite characters like Thor, Iron Man, is look for what I deem like the best representation of those. But I, as a collector, don't have a problem owning, multiples of one figure, because, that's what I really enjoy doing is chasing down particular characters and having different versions of them.
Awesome, man. I feel the same way. I'm going to try to get the best representation of, the majority of the Avengers figures that come out, or I've got a pretty good lineup so far as Marvel characters go. I did go back, in the catalog and pick up a lot of key figures here and there, but I've kind of gotten to the point, and we've talked about this before, it's it gets pretty expensive when you're trying to complete a line or whatever. So I think going with the pre-orders, really going forward, is the way to go for me. There's not really too many older figures that are reasonably priced that I really want.
Yeah, and I think it's important to kind of be comfortable, with that. And again, another thing that we'll talk about often here is the self-control and staying, within an established budget, so that you don't overextend yourself, because then it doesn't become fun. These are so enjoyable to collect and to own, and you certainly don't want to have any regrets about that whatsoever. So, Chris, I mentioned it. We're coming off San Diego Comic-Con. We're not going to go through all the figures that were on display because, man, there was a lot of them. If you want to search for what was on display, there's various different websites and Facebook groups and stuff that you can go out there and see. But, Chris, like I said, we won't cover all of them, but which ones that they had on display that they haven't previously announced, that we don't have on our checklist yet, that are you like the most excited about?
Okay. On the Marvel side, for me, number one is the Vulture from Spider-Man Homecoming. That figure looks amazing. The scale of the wingspan and everything, that suit, I think that would be at the top of my list for sure. I think when the original Vulture from Spider-Man is just this completely ridiculous old guy with, a feathery suit. And when they announced that character for Spider-Man Homecoming, I know a lot of fans were like, what the heck are they going to do with this character? The way they styled that figure is just amazing. I'll take into it. This isn't about the figure, but the character from the movie, Michael Keaton did such an amazing job with his performance of that character that it made me love that figure even more, or that character even more. And I really need that figure.
That car scene, my God,
Oh,
Chris,
my
I know
God.
we've talked about it. We're both fans of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. That car scene with Tom Holland / Peter Parker, man, like just that whole like 5 to 10 minute stretch of that film. And it's a film that's been out for a while. We don't necessarily have to worry about spoilers, but
Sure.
Man, you could cut the tension with a knife on that one. So that was great. So
yes.
Yeah, we'll kind of alternate here. So for me, my number one is Shuri from Black Panther. That one was teased. You and I have been, dying to know when they're going to make that. I just fell in love with that character from the movie, and we got to see her in Avengers Infinity War, with a very brief cameo, but I just love the enthusiasm.
Letitia Wright.
Yeah. So Letitia Wright, she just knocked it out of the park, and so, lovable and fun and infectious, and to be able to own that in action figure form, definitely on the top of my list there.
Just touching on that figure, what do you think about the execution of the prototype?
The face sculpt was amazing. One thing too that we'll strongly suggest is a lot of the artists that work for Hot Toys also post quite a bit on Instagram. And I love seeing the little pictures, Chris. I'm sure you've seen it, of them holding up the painted face sculpt from basically the neck up. Perfect. It even had her little, we've talked about, we hope that she comes with a lot of her gadgets and stuff. That's kind of her jam, but I thought it was phenomenal. I can't wait. I do hope there is a lot of murmurs and kind of crosstalk in a lot of these really popular Facebook groups that they feel like that's a figure that may not get made, but I feel like she's too popular to not get a release either from the Black Panther movie or Infinity War.
I can kind of see that. A lot of people are saying, there's other characters that have more prominent roles that should potentially get a figure, but that's my number two figure. I want that figure. Again, I want it now. I'm sure we could get Sean Michaud to get into Hot Toys for Shuri there. But I think that they definitely should. They need another female character that's other than Scarlet Witch or Black Widow. Diversify the lineup and And the big thing with that figure is some of the female characters, they go with rooted hair, but this particular figure is sculpted hair with her braids. And I can't even, I can't believe the detail that they put into that head sculpt and the hairstyle. It's just amazing. Yeah.
I mean, basically, they also use this opportunity to kind of, a lot of these figures haven't been announced yet, but was to basically finish off the Infinity War line for Avengers. So a lot of those figures look great. We did just see the release shortly afterwards, I think the day after, 2 days after Comic-Con wrapped up, with the War Machine Mark IV. Talk about that briefly. You know, some more of the Solo Troopers. A new version of R2-D2, which definitely caught my eye. Leia Bespin, I know a lot of people definitely like that one. We've got the clones now. We got Commander Cody. I mean, there's just so much goodness out there from Hot Toys, and there's really something for everyone. I'm going to say this probably a lot. It'll probably turn into our drinking game for our podcast, Chris, but you know, you just can't own it all, even though if you want to. But it's super important to stay true to, you know, your budget and your focus. If you do that, you're not going to get into the situation where you're constantly buying and selling because you're like, I bought this but I don't really like it, but I want something else, and that's just a slippery slope. I'm not a strong advocate for constantly flipping Hot Toys. I mean,
No.
they're so highly detailed and expensive and stuff, but there's just also, you know, as I'll talk about in future episodes, there's also a lot of angst that goes in with actually going and selling them on a secondary market, because there's so many different things that could go wrong. You want it to arrive in good shape. So just stick to your guns on these.
I agree 100%.
Before we get into our audio reviews of the two feature figures that we have here in episode 1 of the 6-Scale Scavengers podcast, Chris, as I mentioned, we did actually get a couple newer releases. That we did get a couple new figures that were announced this week. Some of them shown before, some of them entirely brand new. We got looks at the new. We've got a couple weeks ago, we got looks at the new Ant-Man and the Wasp. Those look great. Those have been out there for a little bit.
Yep.
We had some of the exclusives that are now going to be available coming up very shortly with the concept art version of Captain America. You best be sure I've got that on pre-order. Got King T'Chaka that's out there. But then we started getting some of these announcements, and we saw the Spider-Man with advanced suit from the upcoming PS4 video game that was on display. It was also on display with the Spider-Punk. That Spider-Punk has not been announced yet, but the video game version of Spider-Man is up for pre-order. Darth Maul, that is the one that I think is in the DX line, the deluxe line for, you know, Hot Toys. There's one version with the speeder, his Sith speeder, and one without. And that's probably been the one that really caught my eye the most. A figure that won't release until October 2019. You got a little bit of time to think about this one, Chris. For fans that are of Darth Maul, it's going to be the first figure released by Hot Toys from the Phantom Menace, which is also going to coincide with the 20th anniversary of the Phantom Menace. Doesn't that make you feel old?
Oh my God. Don't even.
So we've a lot of people that were a little upset at first because the Mark 50, the Iron Man figure from Infinity War, was announced so early and before the film came out, that who would have known that he had so many different more nanotech weapons and gadgets and stuff. And I thought, Chris, this was going to be the first time that they've released like an accessory pack for an existing figure. It's actually accessory pack 4. They've had 3 other ones. I really am now interested to find out what those are.
Yeah, what are those?
I know,
we'll have to do some research.
Yeah, so I looked at it and I was like, oh, it's ACS 004. I'm like, well, there must have been 3 before this one. And then another one that a lot of people are buzzing about is War Machine Mark IV from Infinity War. That might actually give us the opportunity, Chris, to kind of transition our conversation a little bit into a booming secondary market for a lot of figures. Right now, people are just going nuts for War Machine figures that are die cast.
I couldn't believe the prices of the War Machine figures. The War Machine from Civil War is seriously one of the hottest tickets right now. Everybody wants it. It's an amazing, the aesthetic of that suit and everything is just, it just looks so BA. And I think a lot of people, they didn't go for it at the time. I don't know if it's production was low on that figure, or I think it's got a few things going for it. It's an amazing looking figure. It's die cast. Most of these are pretty low production. So that's a hot one. And then the other hot one right now is the Homecoming Iron Man Mark 47 diecast. You know that one pretty well. That's a really amazing looking suit. I'm kicking my butt for not picking that one up. It was available on Big Bad Toy Store. When I first started picking these figures up, I decided to pass. Yeah, some of those War Machines and Iron Man diecast figures, people just go nuts over.
So I've got a theory, Chris, about that. And I don't necessarily, I think one misconception I think I've seen in a lot of groups right now is the fact that they think every Iron Man that's die-cast is going to blow the doors off everything. Because right now, most recently, the Mark V's out there, and I feel like that's had some pretty good interest out there. The Mark 6 from Avengers, the armor that Tony Stark had at the very end of Iron Man 2 into all the way up through the Avengers, the first Avengers movie, up until, he gets his Mark 7 against Loki there on Stark Tower. I don't necessarily know if it's just that. I mean, obviously Iron Man is extremely popular. I feel like War Machine's an underrated character with Don Cheadle behind the mask in that one. I think it's the figures that people underrate. They don't necessarily pre-order. Maybe you're onto something with a limited production run, because if there aren't a lot of pre-orders for a figure, well, they're not going to go gangbusters and make a lot of figures that people may not end up buying. These figures, I feel like people really underrated. They didn't necessarily pre-order. And then as soon as people start getting it in hand, they're like, oh my God, this is one of the best things ever. I know that because it happened for me, because I was on the hunt for an Iron Man figure. I actually, and this is probably sacrilegious to admit, I hadn't even had the opportunity to watch Spider-Man Homecoming yet. So I didn't even know what to expect from the film. And somebody in one of the groups posted a picture of that Mark 47 armor. And from the production images, I'm like, yeah, it kind of looks like the Silver Centurion version or the Ultimates version, the run that they had a couple of years ago in the comics. And I'm like, yeah, it's pretty heavy on the silver. And then somebody posted pictures of it, and whatever, if it was their lighting and their their DTOF or whatever it is, I'm like, holy cow, that looks amazing. Like just the color scheme and everything. So I was lucky enough to do that. I do also have the Mark 6. I've decided I'm going to keep the Mark 6 and test my luck on the 47, and we'll see how that goes. But I think it also just illustrates another point that you and I have tried to been making, Chris, is if you're sure about something, go for it. You're going to have regrets later. These are collectibles and toys essentially that they hold value. They don't really lose much. I mean, another theory that I have is I feel like Hot Toys really learned their lesson from The Force Awakens and overproducing First Order Troopers from that film.
There's a few of those still available on Sideshow.
Yeah, there's a few of them still on Sideshow for good deals. I mean, they're good figures. Big Bad Toy Store is another one that both you and I frequent. And right now you can buy one of those and get store credit back for some of those. So that's a risk that you sometimes take with a pre-order, but a lot of these really popular figures, and in the Marvel side, you and I have seen it on the Marvel side. I mean, the two most popular characters are Iron Man and Captain America. You cannot touch a Captain America figure for probably under $400 now. It is incredible. I'm glad I got in when I did because I couldn't do what I have right now if I didn't. Maybe I started the boom, Chris. I don't know.
No, you jumped in I mean, seriously, right at the perfect time, right before you jumped in, right before the collectors just went nuts over Captain America. I mean, that's one of my regrets is I should have jumped on a Captain America right off the bat. I decided to go with some of the secondary characters and some of the more affordable characters. I should have just gotten a Cap because now I don't have a Captain America yet. And I really wish I had one, but I mean, it's fine. I can live with the decisions that I made with certain pre-orders that have come out in the last few months, and I'm okay with that. But it between Captain America and Iron Man, I mean, those are the two head honchos. Those are the guys to go to, and a lot of people, start their collections with those characters or base their collections off of those figures, and it's pretty amazing to see. There's quite a bit more Iron Man figures that have been released than Captain America figures. So that's one reason why I think the Cap figures have just skyrocketed, especially with the success of Infinity War. I could see before Infinity War, the deals that I was getting on some of these figures were crazy. And then after Infinity War, it seemed like everybody was buying Hot Toys like crazy. I just, I joined a number of the groups, and you could literally see the trends happening. I'm glad I got in when I did. I think if I waited until after Infinity War, I don't think I would have been able to get the figures that I have so far. And it's just kind of funny how that works. It's kind of cool to watch it happen. And there's so many keep saying passionate collectors, but they really are. There's people have some amazing displays, and some of these completists with the Iron Man suits. It's just incredible to see them all lined up, and it's inspiring. I'm like, I want to have a display. Maybe not like that, but I want to be able to have a display where I can really appreciate these figures. And I think once you get them on display, it's that much more fulfilling to look at these pieces of art. And there's things that you can pull down and you can mess around with. You can swap out their accessories. You can swap the heads. And then you could get into all kinds of stuff like customs and that sort of thing. And it's just really fun to see where you can go with a collection.
Absolutely. Amen, brother. All right, let's get talking about some of these feature figures. We've teased them. Yes. We haven't even announced what they are. So pleased to announce that our first two audio reviews of Hot Toys Movie Masterpiece series, near and dear to my heart, Mr. Luke Skywalker from Return of the Jedi, the first figure I pre-ordered from Sideshow, and it arrived shortly after my birthday last month. I was hoping for on my birthday, but that would have been very earlier in the month, so I'll still take it. Oh, I love this figure. And then Chris, we've got we talked about it. I think I briefly mentioned a little bit ago, but the Hot Toys Iron Man Mark V from Iron Man 2, aka the suitcase armor, and excited to talk about both of these.
Yeah, man, go for it.
All right, so Luke Skywalker, Return of the Jedi. This was a June 2018 US release on the Sideshow website. I guess one thing that I should mention is obviously at the Secret Base, which is the Hot Toys store in Hong Kong that we referenced in our preview episode, you can usually get figures a month or two there before you can get them here in the United States through Sideshow, through Big Bad Toy Store. So this was a June 2018 US release. It's Movie Masterpiece Series 429 or MMS 429. It originally retailed for $229.99. You can still pre-order on Sideshow. So maybe you'll go out and, based on this really awesome audio review, you'll think about going out and getting it. So a couple little stats, because I'm a stat nerd, and we obviously keep all of the checklists and stuff that we have at the Brick City Blockade website, so I can track by the number of figures that have come out from a movie. Chris, this is actually the third figure to be released from Return of the Jedi. There's a couple other figures coming up that have been announced with Emperor Palpatine. Deluxe Emperor Palpatine, and one of the Royal Guard figures. They're not out yet. So we had, a couple years ago, we had Boba Fett from Return of the Jedi, and then we also had a deluxe version of Boba Fett that came out with the Sarlacc pit. So this is the third figure from the film. My God, Chris, this is like the perfect. This is the perfect figure. I'm like, I know people throw out the term it's a grail piece for them in their collection, but it's my favorite character from one of my favorite movies. The figure is just absolutely spot on. It's like, I don't know how they can top this.
I agree with you. So for me, Return of the Jedi is my favorite Star Wars movie. Luke Jedi is my favorite vintage Kenner figure, and I'm trying really hard not to hit buy it now right now on Sideshow. So
but that's why you just come over to my place and you can look at it. So
yes.
So with all the figures, we'll talk about like some of the box artwork and some of the different accessories that have come with it. So one thing we'll mention about the Star Wars boxes, they're rather bland. It's the same black and gray scheme on it. It's very nondescript. It's got an image of the figure on the front. This actually has him as he appears on Jabba's sail barge after grabbing his lightsaber from R2-D2. So the box isn't terribly great to look at. There's always like an insert underneath. It's the same length as the box with a couple folds in that goes over the little trays that are inside. And Chris, I have to laugh because it almost looks like one of those really cheesy 80s yearbook photos that's got two images of him both facing a different direction. One has his cloak on as he's talking to Jabba, and the other one looks like he's looking at the Emperor. Yeah, it's pretty funny. I'll have to send you a picture of what it looks like afterward. And I guess from there, I'll talk accessories. I guess one thing I'll also say about my collecting style, I'm a big proponent of using what we'll call museum poses. I'm not saying that I have them pose very bland, but it's not really in very dynamic poses. I don't necessarily go for deluxe figures just because a lot of the accessories, they don't speak to me a whole lot. And I think they're cool and some of the designs are really good. But for me, they either usually stay in the tray in the box, or if it's a figure that doesn't have a whole lot of accessories, I'll actually take the accessories out, put them in like a plastic bag, and keep them in my, my collecting room. But Chris, this thing's loaded with stuff. Yeah, he's got the handcuffs that he had from Vader on Endor. He's got the blaster he grabs from Jabba's guard there before he goes in the Rancor pit. So one thing that they do with all of the lightsaber figures is they also include a detachable arm that you can insert at the elbow of the figure, and it basically allows for the lightsaber to light up with an LED light. Another little thing that I have with my figures is I tend not to put the batteries in them, just because, not that I don't want to wreck them, it's just I'm not like, light up features don't really do it for me. So I actually, to be honest, Chris, I haven't even taken the extra arm with lightsaber out. The one cool thing though too is it does come with two of the lightsaber blades, obviously. Ignite the green. There's the standard one that you can have there, but then it also has like a swinging trail one where it actually is like a blurred triangle, which looks pretty cool. There's 4 extra sets of hands. I'd say if I have one gripe, Chris, about this is it only comes with one extra black gloved right hand. There's the one that I just spoke about that has the light up feature in it, and the other one is closed. But then other than that, you really can't display it how he has it in the throne room. At the end of the film, you really are left with either the 2 skin color hands that he has. I mean, they do have one that has the blaster damage that he gets on top of Jabba's sail barge before he has to start wearing the glove. So that's a little bit of a disappointment. And then there's a couple other things that come with the robes that he has. The figure outside of the box actually has the extra black tunic that he comes with, that he looks like he does at Jabba's palace and then also on the sail barge, that overlays essentially what he later wears just in the throne room at the end of the film. I personally have mine displayed as he looks like in the throne room, but the material on that is great. And then the other thing is, as I talked about it, the robe that it comes with the figure looks awesome. I still have it in the tray just because I decided not to display him like he looks like at the beginning of the film. But for the value that you get with this figure, the likeness to Mark Hamill, all the different accessories, the stand that comes with it. The stand is one of the standard hot toy bases, but it actually has a couple different inserts. So you can have it be on the Death Star, you can have it be on Tatooine. It's just really cool. And yeah, I'm almost speechless about this one, Chris. It's so phenomenal. The tailoring of the figure. Now, I will say too, his character, his costume is actually rather simplistic. Boots are pretty bland, and basically it's just black pants and a black shirt with a little. You can pull out the front of it so it kind of is overhanging a little bit. There's not a lot to it. It's rather simplistic, but it's just phenomenal.
For this figure, you talk about that simplicity. When you have a figure that has a very simple costume, it's the quality and the execution of the stitching, the placement on, the fitment on the figure. The thing that Hot Toys does is just make the clothes fit as they should, as if they were, it was a real person wearing that costume. You look at some of the lesser quality 6-scale figures, or even the ones that Kenner produced back in the 90s and stuff, and the clothes just fit horribly. Mm-hmm. And the way that Hot Toys tailors these clothes to these figures, it's a second to none.
Yeah, I mean, it's just great. I will say that one little tidbit, obviously, and again, things to kind of look out for. These are definitely designed for adult collectors, and I would say 100% follow the instructions that are included with each figure. They have a tendency to look out for things to be mindful of, things that are extra delicate. I have a Captain America figure that I royally screwed up one of his shields, one of the the leather straps in it, just because I thought I was being careful, and all of a sudden I'm like, I just kind of super glue will fix it eventually, but you want to definitely be careful with a lot of these things. One interesting thing about looking through the instructions, Chris, is it actually says his hair is actually magnetized on the top of his head, and you can actually take it off. One thing they showed at New York Toy Fair 2017 was they showed an Endor version of Luke and Leia, and it looked awfully close to this, but outside of having his, Rebel Commando helmet and then his camouflage tunic there. The cool thing is it says accessories to be released later. So I've been thinking this whole time that they were going to release an entirely separate figure that was going to be Endor Luke, and maybe we're going to get accessory pack 5. I don't know. We'll see.
Got me thinking, because for me, aside from Luke Jedi being my favorite Kenner vintage action figure, my focus is Rebel Commando, and I also love the Endor Luke figure. And I was thinking, if they release an Endor Luke, that may be my gateway, but I may have to rethink that plan now. Thanks a lot.
Hey, that's what we do. All right. So, obviously I'm going to give, I don't even know, Chris, I don't even know. This is our first episode. We haven't even decided what our rating scale is going to be. One thing I said at the top, we are not going to pretend to be experts. We're going to appreciate these figures. We're fans of them. More than often, anytime that we have a figure in hand, it's because it's one that we really wanted. It doesn't mean we won't say anything bad about them if there is things to kind of notate or concerns that you have because of QC production. So, this one, I don't know what a rating scale is, Chris. It's obviously 2 thumbs up for me. I have no regrets about it whatsoever. It's going to be a central point of my collection for a long time. And if you're on the fence about it, if you're a fan of Luke Skywalker, I definitely, I believe this is one of our good friends, Cody, Dagobah Days. I believe that may have been his first Hot Toys figure ever. And I was following him on Instagram, and just to see, you could tell how excited and giddy he was with getting it, and the different photos that, I mean, you can take it's almost like having Mark Hamill, in your office, and you can take pictures of him and make it seem like it's from the movie. I mean, that's how good these figures are. To see him get so excited about it. I know he had reached out to both of us and had tuned into our preview episode. So we'll give him a quick, shout out there. But yeah, all right, Chris, we got our next figure coming up too. This is kind of I highly doubt we'll ever have two in an episode again. It could happen if we both have the same figure in hand, but let's talk about that Mark V suitcase armor.
So my figure is the Iron Man Mark V. It is Movie Masterpiece Series number 400. So it was the 400th figure produced, which is amazing. And it's also designated D18. So it was the 18th diecast figure. It was a release date of July 2018. So just very recent. And it retailed for $344.99. And it is currently sold out on Sideshow. And I pre-ordered this back, I think in February or March. And it, for me, it's not a key suit. It really has a short appearance in Iron Man 2. But for me, so I'll just go over which scene it is. We call it the suitcase armor, suitcase suit. So it was the scene in Iron Man 2 when they were in Monte Carlo at the F1 race, and Tony decided he was going to take over his own F1 race car. Ivan Vanko, Whiplash, in his Mark I suit, walked onto the racetrack and took Tony out. And of course, he's in his race car suit, and he's defenseless. And Happy and Pepper come to his rescue, and luckily Tony had developed this suit. Basically, it's the suit all broken down into a suitcase, and the scene is pretty cool. He opens Happy slides the thing over to him, and he kind of steps on it, and then it just starts surrounding his body. And the design of the suit, it's kind of like scaly, and the way it all connects and forms around him. It's got a kind of a gunmetal, gray, silver, deep red color scheme. For me, that scene is one of my favorite scenes in all of the Marvel movies, and it kind of called to me, and I knew that I needed to have it. They had previously made one, I forget which MMS number it is, but it was a hard plastic version. And a lot of people have done comparisons side by sides, and it's shorter, and you can definitely tell the difference, the quality of the diecast versus the original release. And for me, eventually, when I have this thing displayed, I'm going to have it in a fighting stance versus Whiplash in his Mark I suit, which I grabbed earlier this year. And that was an early release of Hot Toys as well. And that figure really holds up, of Whiplash. It's a pretty cool figure. Definitely search that out on our checklist on brickcityblockade.com. So I'll get into the figure design. It's got very articulated. We won't go into how many points of articulation, but it has all these flaps on the legs, its torso that can pop out, and it kind of gives the illusion of the suit forming around Tony, and it's a sleek design. I know some people have criticized it online, saying it's still a little bit too bulky, but I mean, I think it's tough to execute a figure with a tight armor suit, but I think Hot Toys nailed it as far as the look of the figure and how it compares to the movie version. But so this figure comes with a separate Tony Stark head sculpt with some wounds on his face. I believe this one was reused with one of the previous versions of Tony, but the likeness to Downey Jr. is just on point. Some would say that it's a bit of a static look, but The hair, the color, the skin tone, the facial hair, the eyes just really pop. And it's cool to have that extra head sculpt because you can display it with the figure, or you could come up with a custom body and suit. I know some people have been posting pictures of there's an aftermarket racing suit that matches the one from the film. So people have been doing side by side displays. This figure comes with a lot of accessories. It's got, let's see, 5 hands. It's got a separate battle damage arm. It's got different panels that you can pop on it that make it look like it's battle damage, because Tony really gets wrecked in this scene. Whiplash does quite a number on him. Let's see, it's got light up features in his chest. He's got different hands that light up. Let's see. It's got a cool little stand. It kind of looks like the racetrack. And then probably one of the coolest features is it comes with a separate suitcase that matches the one in the film, as if the suit was all bundled up. So if you had another Tony Stark figure, you could kind of have him with that.
Yeah. How about the arc reactor for Whiplash? That looks pretty cool.
Yeah, it's got that. Yeah, so it's got the arc reactor, matches the one that Tony rips off Whiplash, because Whiplash in the movie, he creates his own arc reactor from scratch. Tony rips that off his chest and crushes it. It's a really neat little piece. It's got, it's just that little extra thing that if you want to make a little scene with these figures, it just, it's nice that Hot Toys comes up with these little details. Not every figure that they put out, they give you all this stuff, but it's nice when they do, just because it just adds more value to the figure, and you can just come up with your own setup for it. This figure, so when you get the die cast figures, just to shift gears here a little bit, the boxes are pretty heavy duty. They've got a slip cover that goes over the top with it's got the Iron Man figure in kind of like a silhouette on the front, on the upper portion, it's kind of encased in plastic. On the back, it's got all the credits for the figure. You pull the top of the box off, and then the figure is actually in a foam. They've got it set in foam, so it really protects the figure. They've got plastic surrounding the figure. Then you've got pieces of styrofoam stuck in between the different joints, so that way there's no chance of it getting damaged during shipping, which, you pay so much for these figures and you really want them to be protected before you even get them. And Hot Toys, they think of everything, and they really do a great job with presentation of the boxes. I should say on the Marvel side, it's a little bit different on the Star Wars side. Pretty uniform as far as Star Wars go, but let's see what else. I mean, that's pretty much it. I mean, I love this figure. I can't wait. It's going to be a while before I can really display him, but I'm looking forward to setting up a nice scene with him and Whiplash, and just enjoying the figure, man.
So we didn't really talk about, obviously diecast is going to weigh, a lot.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of these, I think to ship an Iron Man figure, I think it's over 6 pounds. So, I mean, I think the figures itself is about 4 pounds. So like when you're holding one of these things in your hands, it's considerable. Like when you get them in a pose, like it's not going anywhere. I mean, you can use the stands that they come with, and they usually, some of them, Chris, I don't think this one came with a flight stand.
No.
But some of them you can, have his repulsor lifts on under his feet and his hands, and really create some of those with some of the flight stands. Obviously in Iron Man 2, he didn't have the opportunity to do that. And just, I got to throw this in, Chris, because I feel like Iron Man 2, the film it's a bad rap. I personally like it. And I like the character development for Tony Stark in the movie. And I think that's like one of his low points in the film. So I just have to throw that. And we're both, we're huge Star Wars fans, but also huge Marvel Studios fans too.
No, man, I rewatched it recently right after I get the figure, and I enjoy the movie too. There's some questionable, decisions they made in the movie, but I really enjoy it. It's the introduction of Black Widow, and I really like the Whiplash character. I wish they had done more with him, and I want to see, not to go on a tangent, but I'd love to see Justin Hammer make a reappearance in the MCU. I mean, I love Sam Rockwell.
Yeah, he nailed that. Sam Rockwell nailed that role. So, Chris, one final thought about the Mark V. So, the original non-diecast version was MMS 145, and the retail price for that was $209.99. So, a considerably less. Difference. And but obviously, you didn't. That was not. I actually want to say the first diecast figure that Hot Toys did, I think, was 2014, and it was either the War Machine Mark I, or it may have been even the Iron Patriot figure. I think was the first diecast one they did. It's debatable which one came first, but I think you're right. It's only been something they've done for the last 4 years, so it's reasonably new tech, and I feel like they're always looking to improve. And this first podcast has been great, and it's been long, and we're rambling, and we just love talking about it. So hopefully you as an audience have enjoyed the first episode of 6 Scale Scavengers from the Brick City Blockade Podcast Network. Like we said, hopefully you'll come along for the ride with us, learn from us, we'll learn from you. Reach out to us on social media. Chris, I think it's that time. I think it's plug time. Where can the good people find you on social media?
Best places to find me are on Twitter and Instagram at Vintage Viewport, and on Facebook also, Christopher James Leddy.
And you can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Jedi Scavenger SW. The best place to find the 6 Scale Scavengers podcast is on Instagram. It's 6 Scale Scavengers. Pretty simple. Chris and I will be manning that account and reposting figure announcements and upcoming things about our upcoming episodes. I just really starting to prefer Instagram to Twitter. But that's a personal preference of mine. So, Chris, we mentioned we are part of the Brick City Blockade Star Wars Podcast Network. Head on over to the website. We've teased it a bunch of different times. The resources that Chris and I have put together, and we try to update them at least the day that new news is dropped, if not within a few days. So you can find the links to Sideshow. We don't get kickback from Sideshow. We're not affiliated with them in any way. We're just trying to give you the links to the best resource where you can get these figures for pre-orders, and aftermarket, if you decide after the fact, or, like, hey, I really want to go back and collect some older figures. We've done all the searches for you on eBay and Amazon with all the product codes and stuff. So hopefully you can really easily find some of these figures, because it can be difficult. And, believe it or not everybody is completely truthful on eBay and representing the products they have. So maybe that helps you out a little bit, maybe not. And obviously, being part of this podcast network, obviously you found us because you're listening to this show. You can find us on Apple Podcast, SoundCloud, Stitcher, Google Play, anywhere where you can find a podcast. You can catch it with an app, and tune into all of our other great shows. There's so many great shows and different things that we do as a network, and spreading a positive message and being part of the friendom. I can't recommend it enough. You won't be disappointed. Chris, any other final thoughts?
No, it's just been a great conversation. I know it probably went a little bit longer than we expected, but I mean, it just goes to show that we love talking about these figures, and we really look forward to upcoming content, stuff that we're going to be putting out for you guys, and just having a good time talking about Hot Toys, Marvel, and Star Wars here.
Ditto. All right, for Christopher James Leddy, this is Bryan Fontaine. We want to thank you for tuning in to 6 Scale Scavengers, Episode 1. And as we always say on our network, may the Force be with you.
Always.